Hi gang, you can tell the season's underway. We're bringing back the old favourites on our segments, favourites to us if not to you. But we start with one team, which is a celebration of the fact that this year all the promoted teams by the second game of the season have won a match.
We have the voice of passion, and actually find me the voice of reason agreeing with the voice of passion. More direct football, that's what we're feeling, that's what we're hoping for.
Letter from the Gantry is a sad one. It's an obituary, but for a wonderful life. Gerry Harrison, the commentator.
He was one of the best. We've got three of the best, our regular feature, with players from, give you a clue, Tottenham, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Brentford, Milan, Burnley and Fulham.
And we finish with feedback and a lot of your comments, going back to some of our old regular features and up to date to the recent John Terry podcast. Stay tuned. If you want to get more involved, go to the Patreon. There's a new addition to that today. If you want to just show your support and find out what's going on a regular basis, subscribe. And of course you can follow our reading on substack.com, where Martin's letters are all published for you to read, and where I have recently gone just over the top about coaching philosophy. The Joy of Football podcast with me, Neil Barnett,
and with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks for a shot in! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. Hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett. We're going to go diving straight into the first segment today because we're overjoyed. The difference between this year and last year. Last year it took until the second week of November for all three promoted teams to win a game. This season it's taken just 2 weekends. So our first segment is one team, and we're going to go back in time and pick a team that got promoted and talk about them, and then pick a player, not necessarily related, and talk about them. One team. Martin Tyler. One team.
Well, one team and one player from that team for me, Neil. I know you've done it differently. I go back to Nottingham Forest, who won promotion in 1977 and then won the championship, the old First Division, what would be the Premier League title now.
One promotion in third place before playoffs, so 3 up, 3 down. But they'd be the equivalent of Sunderland coming up this year.
And winning the league, yeah. And of course it was different then. The wealth was spread a lot more democratically, if you like. And the power of the management was down to quality of management as opposed to how much money you can invest in your team. I'm not saying today's managers had that quality, of course not, but in those days it was much more at the manager's door, and they ran the club by and large, and the manager I'm talking about certainly ran the club, being Brian Clough. And he'd come in having had that really inauspicious spell as manager of Leeds, and not looked as though his career was going to go anywhere, really. He'd also had a spell at Brighton where they had some horrific home defeats as well.
Without his assistant Peter Taylor.
Well, yes, that's true. But he had Peter Taylor back for the Nottingham gig. And it's just incredible when you look back at it, so they get promoted, they then win the league, then they win the European Cup because they were in the league as only the champions were in. And then as holders, they went in and won it again. And they also won a League Cup, beating Liverpool as well, who were the big rivals. They actually they bloodied Liverpool's nose really over that period because Liverpool was so used to being brilliantly successful. So it was a real sort of fairy tale, but a fairy tale with a lot of publicity about it as well.
They also beat Liverpool in the European Cup over 2 legs.
Yes, yeah. When Gary Birtles announced himself and Bill Shankly, who was doing the co-commentary, the former Liverpool manager, I can't repeat it word for word, but I think the comment, it might have been my friend Clive Tilsley, who said, he's a newcomer. No one's heard of him. And Bill went, well, they have something now. And that was live broadcast. I'm not sure the tape still exists, but I'd love to hear it. So it was kind of, what Manchester City and Liverpool have been over the last few years, I guess. But it was an extraordinary tale driven by a man who loved publicity but knew how to work it. Brian Clough did a lot of things, I think, looking back, for effect. It wasn't necessarily his absolute body and soul that he would behave like that away from the microphone and the dugout. So it was incredible. And these players, one of whom I'm going to talk about when you've done your team, I think that's the way we're going to do it, isn't it? So for Forest, that time of miracles, really.
And it's worth saying, I mean, this was the second time he did it, because he got promoted. He got Derby promoted, and then not the following season, but he won the league with the team he got promoted.
He had the magic touch, and he had the common touch as well.
It's not like anyone's done that since. So there is something absolutely unique about that time.
And Brian was phenomenal. And to have been around him, because I was very new into my television career, but and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, because Brian Clough was very friendly with the number one commentator on ITV in the country, Brian Moore. And I was working with Brian on programs, magazine programs, Saturday lunchtime preview programs, Brian Moore, that is. But that took me into the company of Brian Clough more than otherwise it would have been. And I made plenty of cups of tea for him, looked after Nigel a few times as well. So it was a real insight. And looking back, I mean, I was asked, the BBC made a really nostalgic programme to commemorate an anniversary of Brian's death quite recently. And much to my surprise, I was asked to be on it, and much to my pleasure, really, to be able to speak about him. Because there was a roguishness about it, of course, everybody knows that. But the truth is, compared to, when you talk about different times, this could not be replicated now in the way that Brian did it. It might be replicated in terms of football achievement, but not in the way that Brian did it.
I mean, in many ways, he was a pre-Mourinho.
Yeah.
He was, and there's not been another one of him since. There have been great managers since, but not that media style of manager. That
we knew he was a special one, that's for sure.
My team is going to be the Brighton promotion side of 2017. Why have I chosen them? I've chosen them because they did it the right way. It's something that Leicester did the right way. It's something that Nottingham Forest did the right way. It's something that Bournemouth did the right way. And I've just chosen Brighton out of them because I had to choose one that represented what I wanted to talk about. They didn't come up and try and play football. They came up and tried to survive. They didn't come up with a philosophy other than defend well, get what points we can, scrap like crazy, and survive. And Brighton did that under the management of Chris Hughton, who got them promoted. And Chris Hughton was an excellent manager if you wanted to defend and fight for your life. He wasn't a very good manager if you wanted to go out and play and be elaborate and entertaining. So Brighton survived for a year and a half under Chris Hughton when they came up. And then they said, maybe we need to change this a bit and become a little bit more open and try and play better football. And from the foundation that Chris Hughton built, they were able to become one of the most entertaining football teams in the Premier League. And they only did it because of the defensive qualities that he installed. If he hadn't installed those, they'd have gone down like all those other teams who play football have gone down. Leicester survived with Nigel Pearson, of course, in their first year up, with that miraculous escape when they were bottom at Christmas.
and then won the league.
And then won the league the following season, but under the management, a different manager, Claudio Ranieri. Yeah. But again, it was getting that defensive stuff right. Brighton had the Australia goalkeeper, didn't they?
Matt Ryan.
I was desperately trying to get Ryan. Of course, Leicester had Kasper Schmeichel. They knew how to defend. Bournemouth, last time they came up and flourished under Eddie Howe and went back down. But they came up under Scott Parker, fell out with Scott Parker early on, and put the manager Gary O'Neill, thank you, in, who was like Scott Parker, defend for your life, organise, defend, organise. And after a year of him, they said, we're there now, we need to get something a little bit more creative, and got in Iraola, who is just an unbelievably brilliant manager for watching a team entertain. And seems to me these clubs are doing it the right way. Forest did it with your mate. Steve Cooper, they came up, they defended for their lives, they survived, even with a 4-point penalty. So they actually survived quite healthily. And maybe Nuno Espirito Santo is a little bit more outgoing with his football than Steve Cooper. And they managed to get themselves into Europe quite well, the team and the club falls apart.
Very well. And now, of course, that's under question as to what's going to happen before the transfer window. We must emphasise we are speaking with a week to go in the transfer window. So.
But what has happened with these clubs is they've faced reality to me, and they've said, we will organise defensively. We will make ourselves tough to beat. We'll nick some points here, nick some points there, and everything is about survival. And then it's a question of whether you can find the right qualities as a manager to move on and up. And if you can't, then maybe it's somebody else's turn. But as a club, I think it's right that we remember the managers who made them what they are defensively, and acknowledge them and respect them. And they have built the foundations for these clubs.
Strangely, going back to my example of this Nottingham Forest, they were based on very good defending as well.
Well, they came up and signed arguably the world's best goalkeeper, and certainly one of the best 5 or 6 goalkeepers in the world, Peter Shilton. It's the first thing they did.
He always knew, Brian Clough, the value. There's a point you make quite often about teams generally, about the value of having a goalkeeper that's worth a number of points. You quantify it to suit yourself, but it's definitely worth some points. But the player I've picked out from that team, and I've gone with a player from this promoted team, had been at Nottingham Forest, I think 6 or 7 years. And 4 of those years, maybe 5 of them, before Brian Clough came. And he got into the team in a midfield position, in and out of the team, and never really looking like a footballer or an athlete. Maybe he never looked like an athlete in the end, didn't. But he certainly was an athlete in what he could do. And I'm talking, of course, about John Robertson.
A world-class footballer.
Yeah, and he was when Brian Clough came in, I can remember it well, that there's this talk, Robertson's in the team, and he won't last. And Clough, when I look back at the quotes from the time, he said, I just saw something in him, and that was eagle-eyed, and he turned him into a winger. And so he gets into the team, he gets in the promotion team, he gets in the team that wins the title. He scores a goal to win the League Cup. He makes the goal for Trevor Francis in their first European Cup final and scores the winner in the second one. So suddenly he'd come from it. I mean, if you don't remember him, dumpy would be a good word, wouldn't it? He never looked like a footballer.
He had skill.
Skill and a turn of foot that maybe the way he was built just gave him, he had a bit more speed off the mark through being unathletic than being athletic.
But he needed half a yard, and he could supply a cross.
His crosses were right foot, left foot. And that's one thing that separates him from some of the other great crossers. He could do it with both feet. And he took, my memories are that Clough gave him a lot of stick, both privately and publicly. I'm sure privately he loved him to bits because, what he did as an individual player and a player that had responded to the type of management that might have frightened off a few. And he's still with us, John, and he's always a pleasure to talk football with. Just an outstanding period.
Well, he was an assistant to Martin O'Neill in management for years.
Yeah. And true football guy, Scotland international, of course, as well. So I think he was the one that Don Revie, when he took the England job, called together a squad of about 60, 70 players, one of whom was John Robertson, who, of course, he'd forgotten or not been briefed properly. Because that was about the time when John was only just making an impact with Nottingham Forest. I think he called him up for an England squad that he was not qualified for, but that shows he was in everybody's mind. But no, it was a great period. I feel nostalgic about it because I was growing up in my television broadcasting career, so I was around it, but not necessarily the centre of it. But I watched and observed and enjoyed it immensely.
For my play, I'm going back to 2014, promoted 2014, Leicester City. I can't remember what their first game was that season, but the second game was away to Chelsea. And Chelsea beat them 4-2. But their right winger, who I'd never heard of, was absolutely scintillating, so skillful. So we were all sitting there. I was in the press box. We were all sitting there saying, who is this guy? Does anybody know who this guy is? It was Riyad Mahrez, who went on. I think people don't acknowledge how great a player Riyad Mahrez was for me, because apart from winning all those leagues and all those different trophies with Manchester City, he scored the winning goal for Algeria in an African Cup of Nations final. They won 1-0 and he got the goal. I mean, how huge is that?
And he had a ridiculous journey to get into where you're describing him now. You know, he was hiking around Europe, almost literally thumbing his way around Europe. I think he had a spell in Scotland and for lesser clubs in France. Maybe I haven't checked the details, but it was where did he come from? How has nobody spotted him? Because he wasn't making that appearance that you saw as an 18-year-old.
No.
And of course, you know, he fulfilled his talent, having played a massive part in Leicester winning the league and getting a few more medals at Manchester City.
Yeah, and I think when people talk about the struggles of City over the last year and a half, they don't talk about him as one of the new absentees, but I think they've really missed him. And but for Leicester, I mean, he's an absolute legend at Leicester, because he stayed on, didn't he, for a year after they won the league and played the Champions League with them. He didn't run off at the first opportunity.
Quite as long as Jamie Vardy did.
No, well, nobody stayed as long as Jamie Vardy. I thought Jamie Vardy actually would outlast Leicester, but Mahrez did his bit, and for a guy I've never heard of arriving in the Premier League with a promoted team, I don't remember any other time thinking, who the hell is that? And being so impressed. But he played in the right wing, exactly like he played for City that day. And terrific. Okay, I've just fallen over.
You actually look quite well balanced in the photo. Of course, our listeners can't see this, but this is Neil on the ball.
At Craven Cottage in a journalist game,
and
at
that's
Craven Cottage.
Probably the only time he was on the ball, as in a football. But with us, he's always on the ball.
I just want to bring something up before we leave this.
Yes.
Sunderland, Burnley, and Leeds have all won a game. Do you think there's a good chance of 1, 2, or 3 of them staying up?
Yeah. Well, listen, you just don't know how the knitting together of what they are now. I mean, I did the Leeds game, and they've got more newcomers since then to come in, and how that will factor out, whether it'll give the team a few problems because of fitting in new players. It can happen that way, or will they immediately knit and be a stronger outfit still? And they that was their win. They deserved to win against Everton, although there was question marks about the penalty that decided the game. So I can speak of them. I'm going to talk a bit about Burnley later on. Sunderland, I've got a Sunderland game at the end of September. So I'm looking forward to doing my prep and be properly briefed to have a look at them.
Because I've always said that pre-Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, for me, the best new stadium in England was Sunderland's, because it's just got a little bit more areas of
but it's got
identity within
the true support.
Yeah,
and
I think they can if they can get their sufficient points at home, they've got a chance, even though they were the third team.
I will be consulting my long-time manager, Allon Dowson, in the non-league scene, who's a proper Sunderland supporter, even though one of his best mates is Graham Jones, who's the assistant manager of Newcastle.
And
I'll get some inside intel on that.
One other question. As we talk, West Ham and Wolves have no points and no goals. Aston Villa have 1 point but no goals. Are you concerned about any of that?
I thought West Ham scored
Ham
against Chelsea.
scored against us. I saw it.
Have you tried to obliterate that from your memory?
It's such a bloody awful stadium. It really is. I was in the front row of the upper tier, right behind the goal, and so I had a good view of the Paqueta's goal. But the view at the other end, you're really, really struggling to see. And when your own team score a goal, you say, "Who do you think that was?" It's can't stick it.
When your new owners build the huge new Chelsea FC stadium, wherever it is, I'm sure it will be just as vast. But you're right, and all the commentators, it's no secret. All the commentators don't like doing West Ham games.
West Ham, I think, looked relegation quality, and Wolves, you just cannot go on selling your best players. At some stage, you get caught out, and I think this doesn't bode well. Now, we said this last year, and Cunha stood up, and Strand Larsen scored goals, but now Cunha's gone, and Aït-Nouri, who I've talked about on here before, has gone. I think Wolves and West Ham are going to give the other relegated teams a good chance.
And there's been talk of Strand Larsen being sold as well. Again, we're speaking before the deadline's finished, but I would say everyone's got a price, and if a presumably bigger club come in, then that might be another problem that the management have to deal with. But it's early, Neil. I mean, you are a classic judger of the situation on the given day, and I try to give a bit of dimension perspective to it.
It's just,
but they have started badly. Yeah. I'll give you that.
Yeah. Okay, we move on to the return of Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion.
Voice of Passion. And, of course, Voice of Reason from Martin. If you're enjoying it, do remember to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on all the other things. I'm not going through that again. Right. I've got several things on Voice of Passion today, so I'm going to be really quick. I'm going to start with Fulham versus Manchester United.
I was there.
Yeah. I think you should have invaded the pitch and demanded justice. What really, really infuriated me wasn't simply that the officials between them, really it was VAR more than the one on the pitch, got both the penalty wrong and the Manchester United goal wrong. What really annoyed me was that when the official in VAR told the referee to go and look at the monitor over the penalty when Bassi pulled Mount over, which he did, they showed the action from the moment Bassi started pulling him and not the action from where Mount ran in to Bassi. And when you saw the whole action, I was watching it live on the telly at the time, when you saw the whole action, it was never a penalty. But what Bassi did to Mount was the equivalent of a foul, but it was a retaliatory foul, if anything. And this, we've talked about this so much, about blocking off at set plays and everything. And referees are told to get on top of it, and they don't, because they just showed the wrong pictures. I mean...
Yeah, but hang on a minute. Chris Kavanagh didn't give the penalty. So
I'm saying I'm not blaming the referee on the pitch.
No. So this is where I agree with you, not voice of reason against voice of passion. I agree with you that it was obviously decided that one foul was bigger than another one, because clearly Mounts was the first foul, clearly, and that was seen in the ground with the naked eye.
Yeah.
And then, but it was more robust, and Bassi, a big guy, you can't mistake him, and he did commit. Had there been no other foul, it would have been a clear-cut penalty. It would have been given by the referee on the field. What I don't like is what you said is true, and it didn't give Chris Kavanagh the chance to do what he should be thinking. He said, when I go over there, I know what I've seen, and I'm going to go, yeah, well, thanks for that. I'm leaving it as it was. And the referees have got to stand up to that. But it's almost as if, once it's in your ear, because they've looked at it again, you can look at it. He should have asked to see it all the way from the corner. But clearly he was told, this is what we're looking at. And therefore, if you just look at that in isolation, you can see them giving the penalty.
Yeah. Total misunderstanding of football from VAR, the VAR officials.
Well, it seems meddlesome. That's the one thing about it.
But then to miss the push on Bassi for the goal, so it was a double whammy against Fulham, was an absolute disgrace, and it's just not good enough. And it comes back, there's nothing wrong with VAR, it's the VAR officials. But I'm going to take it one stage further on the pitch. Newcastle versus Liverpool. I'm not going to say that Anthony Gordon's challenge on Van Dijk wasn't a sending off.
He's apologised for it, so...
Gordon, but Van Dijk said he didn't think it was a sending off in his post-match interview. Or he said that to Gordon. But it was a bad challenge. And if you want to protect the players and you want to say that was a sending off offence, I'm not going to argue with that, because it was the kind of challenge that I really don't like. However, Gravenberch did a scissor challenge on Guimaraes before that, when the game was really nasty and there were a lot of stoppages, and poor old Simon Hooper was blowing his whistle more than anyone was kicking the ball.
He doesn't like to do that, Simon, either. He's a play-on referee, which I think we should all support,
Yeah, and it wasn't his fault that the game was vigorous. I mean, it wasn't great football all the time. It was a great watch. It was.
Yeah, the stats have come out about how little the ball was in play.
40%. Yeah.
And
that's because everyone was kicking everyone else up in the air. Good old-fashioned football. But the point is, Gravenberch should have gone if Gordon went. Gordon was afterwards. But if Gravenberch didn't go, then Gordon shouldn't have gone.
Listen, I can imagine exactly how Anthony Gordon was addressing that situation. Obviously, he's a Scouser. He wants to do well in this particular game, and he's desperate, and he's playing in a position where he's helping his club out because of what the other backstory of that story was. No, but he's been asked to play there.
No. And he hasn't half improved. I saw his first game at centre forward for Everton, and he ducked every ball that he went to head. I think he probably just had his hair done, but he really didn't like the position.
He gives it a lot emotionally, and at times you've got to be able to just back off that a little bit and spare yourself these kind of situations. But if you're a Newcastle fan, you love that he's roaring into people, and I mean that wouldn't have been a sending off many years ago. Mark Hughes would have been sent off almost every game that he played, playing up front, barreling, giving defenders.
No, I don't agree with you. Mark Hughes would have made the end of the warm-up.
He would have. He was a rarity in that he gave defenders what they were giving forwards, and so it was, the pictures showed the damage that was caused, and it was good of Virgil to say something like that. But Anthony Gordon, there's a line these days that players know, and he knows.
I'm not arguing with that decision. I'm arguing with the two decisions not being the same. That's all.
But this comes back to, this is maybe we are disagreeing a little bit. I just don't think VAR needs to get involved. There was a yellow card. The yellow card, everybody would have been happy with the yellow card.
Yeah, I agree. Especially because Gravenberch hadn't been sent off.
Poke your nose in from Stockley Park. And there's too much of that. I have huge respect for referees. You and I argue about it, and I'm often on their side. But there is a pressure. There is a pressure to meddle.
Yeah,
and especially with the younger VAR guys, because they're still refereeing. And
wouldn't it have been brilliant if Hooper had looked at it, come out and said, it's between a yellow and a red card, but I didn't send the Liverpool number, whatever Gravenberch is, off, and I'm not going to send the Newcastle number off.
Well, wouldn't it be great if Chris Kavanagh had said, actually, show me that little bit before that Bassey grabbed him? And I think they're good people, I promise you. And I just think they should be given a bit more license to do that. And that was we do have dialogue. We're lucky to have dialogue with PGML. Howard Webb's very open. And I'm sure that will come up as to why. But I know one of the things will be said is, but that was the bigger foul. But a foul is a foul, you know?
I would just hesitate on what you say, though, Martin, without wishing to be really cynical. I would just hesitate about they're all good. And I would...
No, I'm
definitely
saying they're good people.
Well, I would hesitate on people. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, but I'm lucky enough to get to know them, and
I got to know them all.
Yeah, but you just sit there and slag them off.
Yeah, I do because I think most of them are not properly qualified. They're qualified with their through the regulations. But I just don't think they're qualified.
The one
as
who was really independent was Graham Scott, and he was one of those who went over. It was Spurs versus Brighton, I think. And at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and he went over and was told to do that, and he went, no. I'm not sure that enhanced his career, but it was a wonderful show of independence. And you want the referees to be, in their minds, independent from VAR, unless VAR sees something that spares them from a howl, you know?
I've got one more voice of passion before we leave it. One of the things that made Newcastle-Liverpool a continually thrilling encounter,
when the ball was in play,
as it was delivered back into play, is that Newcastle suddenly discovered that with 10 men they were going to
whack it.
They were going to. Well, it was more the long throws. Yeah. I mean, who thought that Livramento had a long throw?
What about the Asula goal? I mean, that was a goal from down the ages, wasn't it?
Yeah,
his first Premier League goal. I did the game he scored against Birmingham. Oh no, he didn't score. He should have scored against Birmingham. He played really well against Birmingham in the FA Cup, and I thought there was potential when people said he had that. And we talked about him. We mentioned him a couple of weeks ago that he is a centre forward. So that maybe. I mean, it's big shoes to fill if and when Isak goes. But they shouldn't rule him out, and it was a great moment for him. It was a great moment in the storyline, of course, and then a great moment was trumped by an even greater moment to win the game for Liverpool.
Yeah. We'll come on to that. Yeah. But I mean, in times gone by, if you had Dan Burn in your team and someone with a long throw in your team, you would hurl that ball in every time, and that wouldn't have been considered Stoke City under Tony Pulis. That would have been considered sensible football.
Everybody's got a long throw in their ranks now.
And Tottenham destroyed Manchester City by going what you could call direct to get Richarlison running in behind the high line.
There have been good examples in the first 2 weeks of a bit more directness coming into it, which I think everybody would like. But, you know, again, like we're saying about the results, let's let it spread out and see exactly what they're doing against all opposition. If you're down to 10 men, it's one way of doing it, but you need somebody willing and quick up front, or you need to get Dan Burn up to make a nuisance of himself, which is what happened.
Before we leave this, can I just ask one last question? Your last league game of last season was?
Manchester United against Aston Villa.
Where Martinez, goalkeeper, was sent off for stopping a goal-scoring opportunity because someone had run through one-on-one behind the defence. Yeah. In the first weekend of this season, Aston Villa's best defender, Eric Konsa, was sent off for a last-man foul, one-on-one, because someone had run in behind their defence. Mm. That is a problem for Aston Villa. Are these high lines in defending being found out?
Well, that's one way to find them out and to challenge them. But you do need, and this is, listen, you sort of pointed a finger at, and maybe it's now semi-automated, But the decision that proved that Richarlison was onside from a Tottenham point of view, from a direct move, which led to Brennan Johnson scoring with a very good finish, by the way. You need that. So without that, that was given offside, on-field offside, wasn't it? So they overturned it. So although I think they're meddling in the wrong areas, that kind of thing is a massive improvement, because those decisions, everybody accepts them like over the line, and no argument. No, there was no complaints from City. Oh, the flag was up. No, goal, get on with it.
There you go. Right, end of passion, and now actually we're going to change the tone a lot now. Something we haven't really done here too much, but this week it's a kind of obituary on Letter from the Gantry by Martin Tyler.
Letter from the Gantry.
Thanks, Neil. Yes, you're spot on. Today, it's more a goodbye from the Gantry, a tribute to a long-time colleague and friend and a very fine football commentator, Gerry Harrison. Gerry passed away over the bank holiday weekend. His loss will particularly reverberate around the Anglia television region, his commentary kingdom from 1970 to the mid-1980s, and he gave later service to the sports output on the channel. He was the voice of the much-loved Match of the Week. He covered 6 World Cups as a commentator and plenty more in other capacities. In 1978, I was on the same plane with him to Argentina, London to Buenos Aires via Lisbon, Recife and Rio de Janeiro. We did get there in the end. I was the new boy. Gerry had already worked for ITV at the finals in 1970 and 1974 and was a great example to follow on and off the air. He was a very bright person with a wide range of skills, including football, representing Oxford University twice at the old Wembley in the varsity match against Cambridge. We both had spells at different times at Corinthian Casuals, and I did play alongside his brother David, who, like Gerry, was a trained journalist. David had several roles at BBC Television, important roles, including for a time producing the flagship current affairs programme Panorama, the Harrisons blessed with considerable talents. Gerry narrowly missed a career alongside his brother. In 1969, the BBC held a competition open to all for a place in the commentary team for the World Cup in Mexico a year later. The interested viewers had to send in a taped example of their potential. The wannabes, which included me incidentally, were whittled down to a top 6 who were invited into a studio for a playoff to decide the winner. And it was live. Gerry Harrison made that final, along with the then current Liverpool and Scotland household name Ian St John, who would a decade later start an outstanding broadcasting career with ITV, the saint of the Saint and Grevesy. Neither won, but as a result of his promise, Gerry and other finalists were auditioned a few weeks later for a then-vacant Anglia job broadcasting football in the region. Gerry won that hands down, and for the station, it was an inspired choice. Football was hardly ready for television in those days. Gerry's 2 main clubs were Ipswich and Norwich, and in his early seasons, he often had to commentate from behind a goal, making identification at the other end of the ground extremely awkward. His work as a news reporter for a national newspaper had occasionally taken him into war zones, so scaling steep ladders in football grounds, often in full view of baying fans, to reach primitive gantries was not going to bother him. He was also helped by a great self-deprecating sense of humour. Observing after his debut for Anglia, a goalless draw between Ipswich and Nottingham Forest in August 1969, at least I didn't get the scorers wrong. In the first of a superbly researched trilogy of books by Matt Eastley, Brian Moore Saved Our Sundays, the golden age of television football, the author describes Gerry's style of commentary as urgent. It's a good word. He was full of anticipation. He knew the game. His was the world of edited highlights, when 90 minutes was cut down to 20 for a Sunday afternoon screening, and the quieter moments were left on the cutting room floor. No one worked harder at his craft. After the commentary landscape changed, he moved into production and a wider world. He was responsible for the output of the magazine-style television show Football Mundial to a global audience. It was a great success. He was a perfect fit, a lover of the game with a journalist's sharp nose for the stories around it. It meant much time spent in London and beyond, but he kept his home in Norwich with his lovely wife Kate and their 3 daughters. We last chatted at length when he called to pick my brains about Argentina 1978 and our roles in that World Cup coverage all those years ago. As always, it was a treat swapping stories. Gerry was forever young. When he phoned, he always announced himself, "Harrison here." Now he's not. And that, for all his family and many friends, is very sad.
But life well lived. And an old man when he died. Brilliant. Yeah. I forgot the Oxbridge University game at Wembley.
Yeah.
Is that still there?
It's not at Wembley and hasn't been for a long time. But when I was at university, we had a player called Graham Oxley from Newcastle, who was a good player. I think he'd been on Newcastle's books.
Fullback?
No, you won't know him. And he played, I played with him for the university team, but then he left to go to Cambridge, and he got picked. I think December '66, I think something like that, and he scored the winning goal. The sad part, the whole troop of us from the university team, we drove to Wembley, but we got there after the goal, so we never saw it, and we had to go back. We never saw him, and I'm not sure I've seen him ever since, really. But
if you're watching, Graham,
yeah, Graham Oxley, and he was a good player.
So where's it held now? Do you know?
I think it was at Fulham, but I can't honestly tell you where it is. But it's still. I mean, obviously the varsity rugby match holds, and then even then held greater importance. But and Gerry got a couple of blues. I'm trying to explain it, and people don't really know what blues are. But if you play for the team in this particular fixture, you're called a blue. And of course, the colours are dark blue against light blue.
Okay, lovely. Gerry Harrison. Right, another returning segment, been out for the last couple of weeks as we've come into pre-season, now out of pre-season and into season. The return of 3 of the best.
And he makes them pay.
3 of the best. He's made them pay. And that completes a wonderful hat-trick.
Young player, old player. Martin, your young player.
Well, there are a few candidates, aren't there? But I'm going for somebody who played the whole of the game. Or I didn't check whether he came off near the end, but was influential in the Spurs win at Manchester City, in Pape Sarr, who is coming up to 23, and I have mentioned on this show before the players who are special because they were born on the 14th of September, which is a special day in my little life, and so we share a birth date, but birthday, but not the date. Was it 57 years or something between us? But that's not the reason I picked him, of course. But he's developed. He came. I think he was 18 when Spurs signed him, and he went back to Metz in France. And it was a long while before he actually got a few minutes in the first team. But when he did, and he blossomed, and of course he was with Senegal in the World Cup in Qatar as well. And Spurs, I think it's almost 18 months ago now, extended his contract to 2030. So he's definitely theirs. But he's athletic, but he can play. So he's got all the modern traits about covering the ground, but also with the technique needed to play whichever type of football Spurs are now going to play. Maybe different to Ange.
And he's good in the air at set plays.
Very good in the air, both penalty areas. But I want to just tell you a little story to show how much his confidence has grown, because his first name is spelt Pape, and it has. We've had other players from Senegal and African countries, and we know that it's Pape. But in the pronunciation guide that I referred to in the letter last week, last season's, he called himself Pape Sarr. And I did their first game, which was away to Leicester, the first game of last season. And I went to the press officer, Anthony Marshall, and said, look, has he changed his name? He said, no, the players always call him Pape, so he sort of thought he had to do it. So it was a little bit of modesty or weakness in his part. This time I checked again, and he is Pape Sarr. He's got his name proper, and I think that's probably because a year on he's had a great year, and it looks as though he's going to carry on to be really a focal point for Thomas Frank's Spurs as well. So he's my young player.
Yeah, good player. Hurts me to say it, of course, but he is a good player. I've gone for 3 because I just want to talk about what's happening in the Premier League. Rio Ngumoha.
No, he was Chelsea.
Liverpool.
You should know how to pronounce him.
I know.
He was at Chelsea. What happened at Chelsea?
He walked out. He walked out before he was 16, so before he went on his scholarship, so he hadn't signed anything. Yeah. He'd played, I think he played 9 games for the youth team, started 4, come on in 5. But everyone was talking about him. It was a name that we were all saying, what's this kid going to do? And he went to Liverpool, and there was a big battle to try and keep him, and it failed. He wasn't the only one who walked out at that time. Another kid called Ryan Mahrez walked out and went to Manchester City. Now, Mahrez was a substitute for City under-21s in their first game this season, whereas Ngumoha was a substitute unused for Liverpool in their first game and came on for their second and scored this cracking winner. At 16 years and just short of 17 years.
It was
16 years.
It was the Monday, and his birthday's on the Friday.
Yeah, 16 years, 361 days. Yeah. Which made him seem really old because, of course, Max Dowman had made his debut for Arsenal, the second youngest player ever to play in the Premier League, at 15 years, 235 days, and affected the game. In the way that Ngumoha did. Ngumoha scored the winner, Dowman won a penalty, which, as we all know, Opta won't recognise with an assist, but to you and me, that is an assist.
And I believe he won penalties on the tour, didn't he, on the pre-season tour as well. So,
and remarkably, he's not the youngest player because another Arsenal player is the youngest player because Ethan Nwaneri was 15 years, 181 days. That's a full 54 days younger. And on Friday, before either of those two teams played, I was at the London Stadium to see West Ham prove their relegation qualifications for the season. Estevao Willian, to give him his full name, with an N, Willian, as in the old Brazilian winger. Estevao started his full debut with Cole Palmer pulling out in the warm-up, and became Chelsea's youngest Premier League assister, with setting up the 3rd goal, and that was at 18 years, 120 days. Now, being foreign, he can't come and play with the new rules in governing protection of young players. He can't come and join until his 18th birthday, which is why he's only just come now. But it does seem to me that Premier League clubs are in a period where they're going younger.
Well, while you were saying that, I saw Jimmy Greaves play, and nobody bothered to think that he was 17. Chelsea had handfuls of them back in the late 50s, early 60s. And Drake's Ducklings, the Busby Babes.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think 15-year-olds that are accepted. I remember there was a young boy called Eamon Collins, who I think that was his name, that Alan Ball gave a debut to at Blackpool when he was 15. That made a bit of a headline. That's going back a few years now. But if they're good enough, they're old enough. And it's great to see. You're trying to factor in, and I heard some very wise words from the pundits I was driving on the radio on Saturday, hearing things about Dowman in particular, and that he, as a person, can he fit in? When you're 15, are you really in the same company as a 30-year-old? Not by choice, really. That you're probably looking at your uncles or whatever, and certainly your older cousins. So you don't want him not to have his mates around him, but he's been training with them since he was 14, I believe. So there must be a maturity in there. That the parents must have a fantastic part to play in the boy being able to join in, and I'm sure all of these youngsters that they're getting great backing. If it's not directly from the parents, the club now take on a much more paternal, maternal view of it. They're well aware of the risks. If anybody had done that to George Best when he was playing at 17, he might have had a longer, glittering career, though it was. That was always said about George, that he didn't get. He had a landlady who did her best, but really the club didn't do, and with the greatest respect to the way Manchester United was run back there, that the club didn't really feel that they had to do that. Now the clubs do, and care and player welfare is something you hear all the time. There are specialists in player welfare for the older players, even let alone young players. No, I think what has happened, quite simply, Neil, is that you've got 5 subs, so you can throw them on, and if they are that good, and I mean that's taking over to some extent from our big surprise departure for Liverpool, Luis Diaz. Yeah. You know, who really was sold, as I understand it, because they had to have some incoming money, and that he was one that was wanted, and they got a profit on him that they could use in the financial sums that have to be done. So, yeah. So, but great.
It is exciting.
Yeah,
it's exciting.
It was always exciting. Yeah. I saw Ryan Giggs make his debut in 1991 or something like that. I remember, really exciting. Wayne Rooney, remember the name, wasn't it? That you know, that's all happened in relatively recent times. So
the youngest players after those two. Earlier this year, Jeremy Munga of Leicester, 15
couldn't
years,
couldn't wear the sponsorship on the shirt because it was a betting company.
Harvey Elliott is the 4th youngest at Fulham before he went to Liverpool.
He came out of school to play, and when he first came, maybe in a cup game or anything, he literally was at school. I'm not sure. I think as Dowman left school now, there was some talk that he might just have left school. I don't know.
No, he can't have done because he's 15.
You can leave school at 15.
Yeah, no, you can't leave till 16. But what you can do in your last year of school, the Premier League clubs now have their own schools, and you go and study there.
He couldn't play last season. That's because there was some talk about him playing last season. He couldn't play, and that's changed because Darren Fletcher, who's now still in the Manchester United system, who was educated, was staying on for some exam because he was still at school. They wanted to make him make his Premier League debut at the back end of a season, but he had to wait till the new term, if you like, in his football club. And I think Rooney would have played if he was at school, but the Premier League rules didn't allow.
And then the other young ones, Matthew Briggs for Fulham. I mean, he had a career, but not a great career. No. Izzy Brown, West Brom, who he did it in 2013 when he was 16 and had to give up the game early through injury. Aaron Lennon, he had a strong
great career. Yeah.
He made his debut against Tottenham for Leeds, and then most of his.
I told this story before, but I tell you again. Trevor Francis, who made his debut Birmingham Superboy at 16 in the 70s, played till he was 40, but he had a long period out of the game, over a year, with an Achilles tendon injury, and he felt that his body sort of recalibrated. You know, rebooted his body before he puts his boots back on again, and that gave him. They said, "Well, you can go again now," because there is this this theory that you've got 500 games in you. If you start at 16, those 500 games come a lot earlier in your life than if you start at 23. You know, so and James Milner, who we love a lot and we want to go and talk to. He was amongst the youngest scorers, wasn't he? And James Vaughan as well. I think James Vaughan might still be the youngest scorer. I don't know.
Your old player?
My old player is Keith Andrews, who got his first win now as the Brentford manager, having been upgraded from being their set-piece coach when Thomas Frank left to go to Tottenham. And
do we think that Keith Andrews is going to rival Mikel Arteta for the exceptional hair
it's very
in
good,
the Premier League
it's very good
competition? Because my God, what has he done to Keith? How long do you spend to get your hair like that?
Well, he's in his mid-40s nearly. He's got a few years to lose it. That's what we know about it. But what I loved about him was the way he dealt with the issues. And he called it scruffy and ugly, the win, and he loved it because he knows that that's the identity of his team as he takes it on from the Thomas Frank era. He denied seeing Claudia Schiffer at the club, which I thought was probably diplomatic, really, because certainly if I'd been covering that game, I've only once hung around a dressing room to see somebody when I should be up on the gantry, and that was a very famous actor that I probably shouldn't name because it will show that I was a fan of, but it was a male actor. But I would, for Claudia Schiffer, I probably would have missed the kickoff.
Well, I refused to interview Claudia Schiffer. She came to a centenary Chelsea event, and I was there to interview old boys, and they said, go and interview Claudia Schiffer. And I went, no flipping way, she's got nothing to do with football and she's cashing in. I'm not interested.
You weren't there with Recco Welsh and Peter Osgood in the 60s then, were you?
No, that was a bit, yeah. I can tell you some stories about that, but I'm not.
Yeah, no, you're not going to, because family show. And but Keith, I thought, and he said, like I spoke about Wissa beforehand. I'm not going to speak about him. I'm going to speak about the players that have done and won the game for me. And I thought that was good. He spoke up very well for Dango Ouattara, who scored the winning goal.
Who they'd just signed from Bournemouth.
Yes, yeah. And he played 70 or 80 games in the Premier League over a career. He was at Wolves, I think, and hardly made his debut. Didn't make a Premier League debut, and then he played a bit of Blackburn.
Yeah, I remember him at Blackburn. Yeah.
35 caps for Republic of Ireland. A good football man and a good broadcaster as well. Because when I was working at Sky towards the end of my time there, Keith was on quite a lot, and it was very, very good. So he took those skills, those PR skills, if you like, into his management. Just thought the interview was excellent, and I do think that that win, we talk about the important win for the teams that have just been promoted. That was a mighty important win for Brentford, who'd gone behind 3-0 in 20 minutes or so at Forest in their first game, and people saying, "Oh, they've sold all these players," and that was a great. I love the togetherness of football, the teamness of it. That's why I don't like the individual awards. You win as a team, you lose as a team, as they say as well. But they won as a team, and that offers hope. And for somebody, his first game as a manager was wow, really well played. Second game as my first time.
Yeah, my old player is Luka Modric, who of course left Real Madrid in the summer in an emotional farewell, and has turned up at AC Milan, who are playing him in the Toni Kroos Casemiro role of holding midfield from deep. 39 years old, wanting to play in the World Cup when he'll be 40. Chelsea played Milan pre-season, and there was a good crowd there. And it's just the nature of football now. I don't understand why it's like this, but a lot of clubs now sort of take it upon themselves not to celebrate ex-players or not to register the opposition or ex-players in case you're going to motivate them in some way. This was a pre-season game, and Milan had in the ranks Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Fikayo Tomori both playing. Not a mention made of either player. Well, absolutely not.
Funnily enough, Neil, it's not of the same level, but I've got to know the PA announcer at Woking well. Is quite new, volunteer Charlie, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and then we played Wealdstone, who had 3 ex-Woking players, and I said to him, "You must do something," and he did. Yeah. And he did it well.
There's no way when I was hosting on the pitch that I would not have welcomed back an ex-player. 5 minutes before half-time, Modric wasn't starting, was on the bench. 5 minutes before half-time, and it turned out he was a half-time substitute, which I'm sure was planned. He got up from the bench and he ran along the touchline in front of Chelsea supporters to get warmed up, and the whole stand stood up and applauded.
Luka Modric used to play for Spurs,
an ex-Tottenham player, exactly. And somebody who destroyed us in the Champions League on one occasion for Real Madrid. An ex-Tottenham player, but...
The Chelsea fans going soft.
No, he's a world-class player, or has been. And that's...
A truly wonderful player. Yeah.
It's what you do for an old player who you know is coming to the end, who has richly entertained you all his career, whoever he's played for. And I turned around to the people, I was with my family, I turned around and I said, I do not believe that the Chelsea supporters have become more classy than the Chelsea club. But that is how it was. Luka Modric was given the respect that somebody like him deserves. And Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Fikayo Tomori went. Christian Pulisic was injured, of course, so he wasn't there. But Modric deserved that. If I'd have been hosting, I'd have said something about Modric as well. Just
you said something about him today, Neil.
Yeah.
So then you've hit the sweet spot.
But it doesn't have to be war from everybody. It can be joy from everybody. Just war on the pitch. And by the way, Roy Keane and co complain there's not enough war on the pitch now, of course.
That was before Liverpool played Newcastle.
Yeah, he'd have loved it. Only 40% of the time the ball in play.
Yeah.
Your player.
Yeah, I said earlier on that I was going to get Burnley into the show, and I've gone for Josh Cullen, who in their opening win, their first home game, the second game since returning to the Premier League, has scored the first goal and set up the second at a crucial time at the end with a great pass. And it's an interesting story because he's now the captain. He's sort of been a late developer. He was at West Ham for 15 years from I guess an 8-year-old or something like that. And he made I found 3 league appearances that he made. He was out on loan. He went to Bradford City, Bolton and Charlton. He had good spells at Charlton as well. And he's always been somebody you think, Mark Noble was his hero. So you can imagine he might have played, if Mark Noble hadn't played for so long, he might have played in that period, in that position. But he's now got a bit of Premier League limelight. And of course, he's the kind of player that Scott Parker's he got the perfect manager in Scott Parker for his kind of role. I always think that managers do look with great knowledge on the jobs they used to do on the pitch themselves, and therefore they help those players who are in their charge. It was nice. He did play for England at youth team level, but he now plays for Republic of Ireland through family qualifications, and I do think that hopefully that'll be part of a really stellar season for him. He had a spell at Anderlecht where he did well too, so it's not been all sitting on the bench or in the background, but he's put it in. He's a I call a proper pro. And you like to see them get days of reward, and that was, he was at the core of that vital victory for Bernd.
Well, I guess mine is a bit like that as well, because my player is Bernd, the Fulham goalkeeper, who joined Fulham 3 years ago, missed the first 2 games of the season. Well, he hadn't joined them then. So he joined them after the first 2 games of the season and has played every league game since, 114 not out. I don't think he's a world-class goalkeeper. I do think he's an absolutely magnificent Premier League Fulham goalkeeper. I think he has been superb. He was brilliant, I thought, against Manchester United, especially the save from Cunha when he pulled the ball down.
Actually, I should mention being there that Altay Bayindir was good as well, despite the fact he's had criticism. The save he made from, I think it was an Iwobi volley through a crowded penalty area, was very high order. I thought actually the story of the game, apart from what we've talked about earlier, was the quality of the goalkeeping, which is why it was only 1-1.
I mean, Leno, maybe he wasn't quite good enough for Arsenal. Martinez certainly improved them when he came in, and then of course they signed Raya. But when he was at Arsenal, I interviewed him after a game, and he'd come out for a long ball into the box 2 or 3 times, and it was all a bit dicey and everything. But he stopped and gave an interview afterwards, and new to the Premier League, was very articulate in English. And I said to him, it must be a big shock for you having so many long crosses from deep coming into the penalty area. And he said, no, not at all, he said. We have just as many in the Bundesliga. Absolutely just as many. It's not different. He said, the difference is that when you come out to catch them, your forwards are allowed to jump into you and knock you about, and it's much more physical. Yeah. And he said, that's the difference. And I just thought, he had something intelligent to say about goalkeeping. And he's had some knocks, and I think he's up there with the best Fulham goalkeepers. When we went and picked up all-time Fulham 11 after going and talking to Tom Kearney, I put Mark Schwarzer in goal because he was in the goal for the Europa League final, and I think their highest ever Premier League finish. But last season was their most ever Premier League points, and I honestly think Bernd Leno is challenging for that, and that's with Edwin van der Sar having been there as well. And Tony
our friend Tom is still the club captain. Yeah. Bernd is the team leader when Tom doesn't play.
Yeah.
So they do think highly of him.
I think he's done terrifically, and I think it's been a credit to German goalkeeping. Well done, Bernd Leno. So that's my man. We've just got a bit of time left, so we're going to do feedback very quickly.
Do you know what you're going to say? Because I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm going to race through some of these. If you remember, we've had so many passions about the rules of the game, and of course, I wrote about it on the Joy of Football Substack.com site where you can read us. And we've had this from Robert Huth, ex Premier League champion. Let the physios run on whilst a player is down. That will stop some of the diving and time wasting. In other words, the game goes on around them.
Well, that's a brilliant idea, and it happens in certainly rugby league. I don't know about rugby union, but I went to a rugby league game last year, and that happens. I'll give you one other for Robert to digest as well. When they need the water breaks, like in cricket, take the water out to them. Don't let them come to the sidelines. So they all have to go in the centre circle, and the water carrier for each club takes the drinks out, gets their drink quickly, get on with the game. It goes on. These stops that are supposed to be for the benefit of the players' welfare are actually for the benefit of the coach's welfare. End of.
A former Newcastle forward, Geordie Joe Allen.
Ah, yes. Also played for Chelsea.
Yeah, well, that's how I know him.
Yeah, the connection is here.
He says, my old boss Jack Chartlon said to me, football's a simple game. It's the players that complicate it. I candidly agree. 11v11, one ball, one ref, two linesmen. It's still a simple game. It's the officialdom and men in suits that complicate it.
Yeah, well, Joe, I think many people, apart from Neil and myself, would agree with you. And we agree. We agree to an extent. Of course,
this is not from an ex-footballer. Ian Seymour says, "I'd add that if you have a foul given against you, you or your team are not allowed to touch the ball. If anyone does, then the free kick moves upfield."
Well, yeah. I mean, or you could say a yellow card, and then that would stop it. Full stop, won't it? Although I did see it, and actually it caught me out because I didn't expect to see it. Leeds against Everton, where I think it was Charlie Alcaraz showed an imaginary yellow card to the ref. The Leeds player should get booked, and of course he immediately got booked. So that penny hasn't dropped yet. So that's one that's beginning to come out of the game, hopefully.
This is about other areas of the podcast. Jesus Martinez from Texas, Houston, says, Martin's letter from the Gantry, they're brilliant. Absolutely love hearing and reading them. Officially listen to all episodes as of 10 minutes ago, and 100% agree with you on the dislike of Chelsea fans singing "We Hate Tottenham" during the Liquidator when the teams run out. Then our pre-season talk of the different teams. This is from a Villa supporter. Not enough has been talked about Villa's youth system. Much of pre-season has been played by many of their treble-winning domestic youth team. Villa do not need to go crazy in the transfer market when your youth system is so effective. That's really interesting. There was a good piece, I think, in The Athletic last week about how much the Premier League clubs, or how much all the clubs have raked in from selling academy players. And not surprisingly, Chelsea were number one. Villa were number two.
Well,
I was really shocked by that.
They've had very good youth teams over the years, but of course, one of the reasons they're selling them is to fall within the financial regulations.
Dean Henderson, not the goalkeeper, says, Neil, I challenge your Everton prediction. They will push for Europe at worst mid-table. I said they'd struggle this season. Mocha Eagle says, Burnley fan here. Love the podcast. Totally agree Burnley need goals. I wasn't too impressed with Fleming last season. We need a good number 9, but Anthony and Edwards performed exceptionally.
Well, but I mean, actually, Edwards we've been waiting to see him in the Premier League. He's been around and about, not just in this country, so he's more of a wide player. So we'll see what he brings. But Josh Cullen's there at the helm, so I think that it's. Listen, it is a really, really tough adjustment, and one of the things we always look at: have you played in the Premier League before? When you come into the Premier League, that's why. When Lucas Mecha took the penalty for Leeds, his last Premier League appearance, and he only made 2, both as a substitute, and this was a substitute, so number 3. The other 2 were 7 years earlier. But essentially, you could say he had played in the Premier League, but not really. Then a lot of the players, to play in the Premier League is almost like, it's like a badge of honour. It is the badge on the shirt. And I look back, I was looking up Keith Andrews, how many games he'd played, 70 or 80 games. As a Premier League player, but dotted around his career, certainly not in one chunk in the middle, you know.
JJ BCFC, do you think that's Bristol City? Says, could listen to Martin Tyler talking about football all day long. Well, if we did a podcast that lasted that long.
It might be Birmingham City, because we had some nice comments about that last year, didn't we?
And now some responses to the John Terry guest appearance on the podcast last week. On playing out from the back. This is IP, or isolated play, he calls himself. JT absolutely kicks it here. Do you have to remember, he said, I wanted to play out from the back, but if I went wide and there were 3 players on the edge of the area closing us down, I said, I'd say not today, and we go long up to Drogba or whatever. JT absolutely kicks it here. It's what Maresca talks about. If there is more space, numerical advantage by going long from build-up, target that. If it's the opposite and they've got dominant centre-backs, but we overload them and more space building out from the back, we'll play that way. I mean, it does seem obvious, but it doesn't seem to happen.
No, I do think it does happen. I mean, at the Fulham Manchester United game, Manchester United pressed very early on, and Fulham didn't play into that trap, really, did they? It is common sense, but we're talking about human beings here. We're not talking about robots. We're not talking about the computer games.
The argument is that they're playing like robots. That's.
Well, no, but that's where they shouldn't be. They should be given. It's a responsibility that you want the player. The coaches should trust the players, but even at the working academy where I'm helping out, we give them instructions. I know they're 18-year-olds, not at the level we've been talking about, 18 and teenagers there. But once they get out there and ready to play, you have to shout at them to remind them of what it is.
Well, Harry responded to this by saying, even in Sunday League now, they expect you to play out from the back like Prime City. And someone replied to him, Miles, saying, then it ends up like City last Saturday. So, John Terry, JT, saying that he didn't enjoy football as much as previously, watching it. Buddha on TikTok said, modern day football matches are technically excellent, but as a spectacle, as boring as it comes. Pep Guardiola is the man seen as the genius coach, but he has ruined the game. Unfortunately, his philosophy has spread like a disease through the football leagues. No tackling, VAR, cheating, the list goes on. John Terry is bang on. I totally disagree with this. Pep has not ruined the game. Everybody copying him has ruined the game.
He's had the best play. But it was interesting, and they obviously against Spurs, they were not at their best. And when they're in trouble, they did go long. Yeah. It was more. And I noticed I did one of the games in the Club World Cup when these new players had arrived. Cherki played, and Ait Nouri played, and Reinders played. So that they were very much at their form. It might have been their debuts even, and but I could sense that it was a little bit different. And Pep knows that. I mean, he's not just trying to clone all the players from the past. And you deal with what you've got, and now this is time of year. It's what you've got that creates all the angst for the managers. It's what you haven't got, and you've got a week to get it.
A final one from Jack. On where he was talking, John Terry, about Premier League games were easier than training because it was so intense.
Yeah,
the
that
training
was a brilliant line. That.
And Jack says that's why I don't rate Virgil as high as people like Vidic, Ferdinand, and Terry, because the level of strikers and general attacking play isn't as good as it used to be, and teams aren't as direct.
Well, there aren't as many numbers to deal with as perhaps.
No, two up.
Yeah. But that'll come back.
Yeah.
What goes around comes around.
But I do rate Virgil. And I do. I think he's.
Well, Liverpool have invested a lot of money in keeping Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah, and that's
in old age.
Well, they're still in their prime, they would say. And listen, there are sensible people making those decisions, but it took a long time for it to actually happen. So they gave it real consideration, probably watched it right to the end of the season to see if they could detect any weakening, and they didn't. And so sometimes it's Fulham, who I am commentating on the next time we did a podcast, I was commentating on a Fulham game. They said their whole transfer window, this is the owner speaking in the programme notes, to keep the squad. So sometimes the best dealing is to keep those that you trust and you know. And as you say, Fulham had a very good season last season by their standards. So why not keep those players? And then I'm sure Marco Silva has a different view on it, but that was the justification for very little movement in the transfer market from Craven Cottage.
The joy of football for some people is talking about it. And we do a lot of that. Thank you for listening and watching. From Martin and me.
Yeah, I'm going to have the PS on that, because Neil and I have came to the conclusion that if we didn't talk to you, we'd be talking to ourselves in a pub, and I don't drink and I can't afford to buy him beers all the time. So we've come to his kitchen where he's supporting me with free cups of coffee. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back next week.
That's all right. We failed. 1 hour, 15 minutes. We were targeting an hour. We failed.
Added time.
Yeah. I mean, basically, we're just a couple of old men.
How long was the ball in play? That's the most important thing.
Yeah. I think common sense for about 40% of it, and the rest was...
Yeah, that was me. The rest was Neil. See you next time.